Up next on The Way of the Renaissance Man, how to be a hero and how to spot a terrorist. Welcome to The Way of the Renaissance Man podcast. This is a show about ideas, personal empowerment, and celebrating the rational life. Our goal is to help each other discover the tools needed to better focus our minds, integrate our thoughts with actions, and live the lives we really want. I'm your host, Jim Woods. My guest today is John Iannarelli. He's a former special agent with the FBI. His expertise includes cybersecurity, but most particularly terrorism. And in today's show, you're going to learn how to spot a terrorist. I'm here with former FBI special agent, now retired, John Iannarelli. Did I get that right?
You did.
Okay, some names are harder than others. But you're a supremely interesting guy, and I want you to tell me about your background. Like I said, you're a former FBI agent, but you specialize in counterterrorism and in cybersecurity. So you have a lot of stuff to teach my audience about how to protect themselves, both from an active shooter situation and also from a cybersecurity situation. Because I've written about this before in the past. I know there's things that a person can do to help survive an active shooter situation. Everything from just being aware to being physically fit to learning how to, being comfortable with firearms. If you have to, if it escalates to that level, it might. You never know. I mean, these things happen. And you want to be prepared for that because even though it's most likely not going to happen, the consequences when it does are all there is. So tell us about your experience of that. Talk to me about all the stuff that you've done as an FBI agent with respect to that.
Well, Jim, first of all, thanks for having me. And I will tell you, you're right. Chances are it's probably not going to happen. But you know what? You still pay for fire insurance for your home because when it does happen, it's significant. Well, it's the same thing with an active shooter situation. You want to make sure that you're aware and what to do. So I spent 21 years in the FBI, and I've worked every violation you can imagine. I was working bank robberies on 9/11 and 9/12. I was working terrorism along with the rest of the FBI. So having done that and having climbed the ranks and become a leader in the FBI where I had a lot of people under me directing terrorism investigations, I've also had the misfortune of being at the helm when there's been shootings that we've had to investigate. That's why it's so important the average American today understand what to do, protect themselves, protect their families.
Well, that actually brings up this point. You wrote a book called How to Spot a Terrorist Before It's Too Late. Now, this book, I take it, was written for the average citizen, not the law enforcement professional, but it kind of lets you see the world through that professional experience that you have. So tell us about the book.
Well, the reason I wrote the book is because after 9/11, we started hearing if you see something, say something, but no one ever stopped to explain what should you be looking for.
Yeah, exactly.
With all the eyes and ears out there in the general public, it would be very helpful to law enforcement if people could pick up the phone or send an email of information that was actionable. So what I did was I took the things that law enforcement knows that everyone is trained in the academy to look for, and I put it into simple everyday words, 10 basic tips of if you see one of these things, that's something you should say something about.
So tell me give me a couple of the most important ones that I, as just a citizen walking around, should be aware of.
One of the things we look for is gathering supplies. The FBI and law enforcement refers to it as a tripwire. So if your neighbor suddenly decides they're going to start stockpiling guns out of the blue, nothing wrong with owning a gun here in the United States, but if suddenly you decide you want to buy 20 of them and have 5,000 rounds of ammunition, which is what we saw from the shooter in Las Vegas, that would be a clue that maybe you want to call the police. Now, bear in mind, it doesn't mean that person's getting arrested. They may not even get contacted. But law enforcement behind the scenes will make some inquiries. They'll look at their computer records. This guy ever been arrested for anything? Is he involved in any groups that we should know about? Has his name come up before? That's enough information that law enforcement can take it to the next step and maybe prevent an act.
So tell me about you mentioned the Las Vegas shooting. You have a really interesting story about that day. It was about a year or so ago. Tell me about that.
Well, it was last October 1st, and I had just arrived in Vegas about an hour before because I was going to be doing a presentation to a group of homicide investigators the next morning. And I had a friend who's in law enforcement was actually at the concert, and they were planning to come with their spouse and listen to me speak. So we're talking on the phone while they're at the concert, shouting so that I could be heard because of the noise. And during that conversation, they go into full cop mode, and they tell me, hey, we're taking rounds, hang up and call 911. Well, I'm in a hotel right across the street, and I can see what's going on with the carnage. And shortly thereafter, I get a call from Fox News, who I do some consulting for, and they say, we hear there's a shooting in Vegas. You know anything about it? I'm like, I'm here. I can see what's happening. So I spent about 3 days reporting on national news for Fox and other outlets, which brought me behind the scenes to see some of the things that were taking place and learning more about the investigation than the public was told.
What is the real story behind that? Because I don't think anybody knows. Well, let me rephrase it. There's been a lot of confusion about the situation. This guy did not fit the profile at all. He was not a guy that he doesn't supposedly link to terror. He wasn't, any kind of he had money. He wasn't kind of, lashing out on society, at least that you would see. But do you have any insight on that? Like, what was the real motivation behind that situation?
Well, I think one of the lessons we take from this is when we're looking for what the profile, there is no profile when it comes to active shooters. There are some commonalities that we've seen, and this person did have some anger issues, but you don't know there's a problem until it rears its head. Unfortunately, it reared its head incredibly violently the first time publicly. There may be some issues with, he had money, but it also appears he had been losing some money as well. The real story here is all the indicators, the things I talk about in my book that happened within 4 days before that people should have noticed, but they're not trained to notice.
Right.
So when he checked into the hotel, for example, anybody who's ever shot a gun in this country knows what ammunition weighs and how heavy it can be. This guy checks into a hotel with 10 suitcases by himself, carrying 22 weapons in his suitcases, which are fairly heavy, and 5,000 rounds of ammunition. That in law enforcement is referred to as a clue. And it's something that the public could have looked at and said, you know what, maybe we should let the police know about this guy.
Yeah, that was a whole lot of luggage for one man.
Absolutely, but unless you're trained, so it's really no fault of the young boys that were carrying luggage up and working in that place. It's about training your staff at a hotel or any other place where you deal with the general public of what the signs are to look for.
Okay, so that brings me up. So you've had a lot of expert training. You are in the FBI as a trainer. You've had a lot of information. And I want to know what someone who is not in the FBI, let's say, can gain out of that experience. Like, what does it take to be like a high achiever in the FBI? What does it take to even get in there? And what are the kind of common traits that would allow someone in a different profession maybe to excel?
Well, the great thing about having been in the FBI is you're not around any underachievers, and you're certainly not around any boring people. I think I was probably more average than some of the great people I worked with. I literally worked with a rocket scientist that left NASA so he could be an FBI agent. I worked with medical doctors that gave up their practices so they can go and join the FBI. If you want to be an agent, aside from having done really well in school and having been very involved in a lot of things, you have to show a history of success. You have to show that you can take on problems, whether it's work, personal, or anything else, and achieve. And with that success comes a certain amount of failure along the way. We want to see people who got up and tried again and succeeded.
Right. See, now there is something that I stress my listeners. Failure is a good thing as long as you know how to come back from it.
Exactly. You know? One of the things I always told my agents was, don't worry about failing at what you're doing. Learn from that mistake. I've never learned anything by doing it right. It's when I've done something wrong and tried another way, it's how I've learned something new to succeed in the future.
I've never learned anything by doing it right. I'm going to steal that.
You're welcome to. I get the royalties.
You get the royalties. Okay, so tell me more about your background. How did you get in the FBI? Did you always want to be an FBI agent?
You know, I'm one of these guys that 9th grade career day, an FBI agent walks in and I'm sold. That's all I want to do. So every career decision I made to get from point A to point B was based on that. I became a police officer. The FBI, we hired accountants or attorneys back in the day. So I put myself through law school nights while working as a cop and then practiced law for a while. Eventually got selected by the FBI. So I've gone from one hated profession to another, but it got me there. And just a little footnote to all that, I'm finally in the FBI Academy from 9th grade to the day I'm accepted is 18 years. But at the FBI Academy, I run into that same agent. They're having his retirement party. So it's amazing the path life can take you.
See, now that shows me something that I believe in is if you have a determined goal and you're willing to do what it takes to get that goal. Now, you may not always reach that goal, but damn it, you're not going to reach it if you don't have that determination.
Well, I know most parents listening are not going to agree with me, but I've got a son that was in the military. He's now going to college, and he has his goals set on being a writer. And I told him, if you have something to fall back on, you probably will. Throw yourself into what you want to do and let the chips fall where they may, and just go for it.
I want to meet your son because he and I were both in the Army. We're both infantry. He's going to USC. I went to UCLA, so that's a bit of a rift.
A little rivalry,
it's okay.
but
we're the same town.
I'll sit in between you guys.
Yeah, there you go. And he wants to be a writer, and I am a writer, and that I encourage him to do that. I encourage anybody to do what they want to do as long as they have the discipline and the focus to try and do it right. You can't just say, I want to do something. I wish I could do something. Just do it.
I could have done a million other things along the way. Being an attorney, I could have made a lot more money in my life along the way. I never was deterred because I knew I had to try until they told me stop trying. And you only get to apply to the FBI twice. If you don't make it the first time, they give you one more chance. I was lucky enough to get picked up on the first try, but until I got to that point, I couldn't apply or I was too old. I was going to go until I could get there.
See, that's a kind of determination that I want to stress everyone listen to and pay attention to and understand, because you're not going to do anything in life without some hardcore determination. Now, you could be lucky. Some people are lucky and some people are fortunate. But whatever it is that's good, it takes a lot of damn work.
Well, and I believe in making your own luck. And the way you make luck is by working hard. And the worst thing that would have happened to me is I would have had some serious skills that I could have used in other things in life that I picked up along the way while pursuing my goal.
Now, let me ask you something. You are someone who's obviously goal-oriented. You've achieved a lot in life. Have you failed at anything that you really wanted to do? Like, is there anything that you considered like a regret or something that you didn't, achieve? What?
I think we all have regrets, and I made a lot of sacrifices in my life that I look back on. There were a lot of things I missed with my children. Frankly, I'm a divorced person, and I made a lot of mistakes in my marriage because I devoted myself to work.
Right.
Fortunately, have a great relationship with my ex now. But yeah, I look back and I think I made mistakes, but I'm going to be a better person along the way. And certainly my relationship with my kids, relationship with other people is enhanced because I've learned from my mistakes.
Excellent. So tell us a little bit briefly now about the cybersecurity thing. You're a cybersecurity expert. Tell us from a personal standpoint, what should people be doing to protect themselves? Because identity theft, is just a huge thing. And a lot of my listeners that are pretty, they have money. They're also using a lot of stuff online. They're using their credit cards. They don't ever use cash, hardly, that I come across. I'm the only old school guy around that I know I like cash. So tell me what someone needs to do. What do I need to do to protect myself?
In today's problems with cyber, people are still not doing the basics. So it's more than just having a password. It's having a good password, and it's a different password. I must have 50 different things I log into on a daily basis, and I have a different password for each and every one of them. Now, I use techniques like various programs that can monitor my passwords and keep them for me, but that's number one, because if one password's compromised, everything else is still safe. Likewise, being aware of who you're entrusting your information to. All these social media sites that people go on, including myself, recognize you've given up your privacy. And most importantly, take care of your computer. Make sure you're using good computer hygiene. You're looking for viruses and things, so that way you're not being spied on.
Okay, so we want to make sure we safeguard our passwords. We also want to make sure that we change them up, not keep them, not just use password or whatever. That's some basic stuff. So are you worried about the future of that situation? Because it seems like we're not taking it as serious as we should.
We're not taking it serious because most people don't understand it. Today, a lot of people are starting to talk about blockchain as if blockchain is going to solve all the problems. I guarantee you, most of your listeners are probably not even familiar with blockchain because it's the new buzzword. But just because we've come up with a solution doesn't mean the problem's gone. Look at the chip on your credit card. Wasn't that supposed to solve everything and we didn't have to worry about it anymore? It hasn't changed anything because the criminals are so far ahead. Remember, investigators, law enforcement, they're not out there fixing the future potential problems. They're responding to what's happening today. Criminals are thinking ahead to tomorrow.
Yeah, law enforcement is by nature a reactive situation. You're reacting to crime, sure, there's some proactive stuff like your book, being proactive and learning how to spot things before they escalate. But just the nature of the game, you have to kind of wait till a crime happens before you really dig down in it. But you can't be that way for yourself. You have to look forward and see how am I going to protect myself? What am I going to do? And I think it comes down to the planning thing. It comes down to like people being aware of their circumstances, like aware of an active shooter situation, aware of a cybersecurity threat, aware of some problem in the future, whether it be their weight, their finances, whatever. You need to plan for the future and plan for those problems to be solved. Because if you're not, you're just going to let it happen to you.
As a consultant for terrorism, cybersecurity, etc., I would love to be out of work. I'm ready to retire. But the reality is these problems are going to exist. People do have to be proactive. By the time you've called the police, the damage is done. Make sure you're in a situation where you never need the police help.
Well, John, do not retire because we need you, my man.
I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Right. And then if anyone wants to find out anything about John's books or about John's web pages, his consulting services, I'll have all of the links on the Way of the Renaissance Man podcast show page. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.